Montrose sits quietly on Colorado's western slope, a place of red cliffs, hayfields, and silence. The kind of small city where people wait for a pickup truck and funerals are community event, not transaction. The Sunset Mesa Funeral Home stood on East Main Street, just another local business with a name that promised warmth and peace. It offered green cremations and affordable options for families without much money. A service that felt humane in a country where dying is expensive. From the outside, nothing seemed amiss. The owners, Megan Hess and her mother, Shirley Koch, were well known in town. Hess, who had worked as a funeral director for years, cultivated the image of a compassionate local entrepreneur. Her family attended church, volunteered, and spoke kindly to neighbors. To the community, they represented something rare. People who treated death as service, not commerce. But behind that front room, behind the flowers, brochures, and hushed condolences, was a second business few knew existed. Between 2010 and 2018, Sunset Mesa quietly ran a side operation called Donor Services, a body brokering company that sold human remains for use in medical and scientific research. Hess and Koch offered families discounted or even free cremation if they agreed to donate tissue. But according to later federal indictments, many families never consented at all. Some were told their loved one ashes would be returned. Others received urns filled with unidentified gray dust that was not human at all. Heads, torsos, limbs, and spines left Montrose in cardboard boxes bound for research facilities, universities, and private brokers. The labels carried code numbers instead of names. For years, the business thrived in shadows. There was no requirement under Colorado law for funeral homes to disclose ownership of a body donation company. There were no routine inspections, no tracking systems, and no digital registry linking remains to disposition records. Donor services in Sunset Mesa shared an address, a staff, and a walk-in cooler. Families who entered one business unknowingly became part of the other. It was an open secret in certain corners of the trade. The prices were low and Hess always eager for donation. One former employee later told investigators that she often watched Hess dismember bodies with a reciprocating saw, labeling limbs for shipment. It was like an assembly line, he said. Sometimes she'd take a head and put it in one box, a spine in another, arm somewhere else. When the worker asked whether the families had agreed to the donation, Hess reportedly replied, "They signed the forms, don't worry about it." Many had not. The deception might have gone on indefinitely if not for a tip. In 2016, a former employee contacted the FBI, disturbed by what she had seen and by the smell that clung to her clothes long after leaving work. The investigation began quietly, with agents gathering shipping records and interviewing grieving families. For nearly 2 years, it pieced together the evidence: falsified cremation certificates, fraudulent donor consent forms, and shipping manifests showing human remains transported across state lines for profit. Each file told the same story: a promise of dignity exchanged for dollars. In February 2018, federal agents raided the property. The scene inside was grim even by forensic standards. Investigators found freezers packed with human heads, limbs, and torsos. Some were labeled, others were not. They found evidence of bodies that had tested positive for hepatitis and HIV being dismembered and sold anyway in violation of federal law. They found stacks of cremation certificates that had never corresponded to an actual cremation. When news reached Montrose, the shock was immediate and total. Families filled the town hall demanding answers. One woman held up an urn on live television and said, "I don't even know who this is." Another family described how their son's remains had been donated without permission. His body dissected and sold to 3 different labs. Local ministers called it a crime against the dead and the living alike. The people of Montrose had trusted the name Sunset Mesa for years. It was carved into headstones. Now it read cursed. The federal case took years to complete. In 2020, prosecutors formally charged Hess and Koch with mail fraud and illegal transportation of hazardous material. Court documents describe the scheme built on deceit and greed, in which the defendants betrayed the trust of grieving families for profit. The trial revealed the extent of the betrayal. Hundreds of bodies, possibly more, sold piece by piece to buyers in at least 5 states. The woman pleaded guilty in 2022. Hess received 20 years in prison, cost 15. But the legal outcome could not repair what had been broken. Families who learned the truth years later described the second day. The first for their loved ones, the second for their faith and the sister. One man said he had to reimagine the meaning of burial itself. Where the funeral for ashes that weren't even human. How do you grieve something that was never there? Another family refused to scatter the ashes they'd been given, keeping them sealed in the garage cabinet as evidence of betrayal. Sunset Mesa exposed more than a criminal. It revealed a system so loosely built that such crimes were possible in the first place. Colorado, at the time, was the only state in America that did not license individual funeral directors. It had no mandatory inspection schedule, no chain of custody requirement, and no centralized method of cremation. Paperwork existed, but paper is patient, never alert anyone. And a line is false. The state relied entirely on trust, and trust, once broken, can't be patched with a memo. The aftermath rippled far beyond Montrose. The FBI launched a broader investigation into the body broker industry, a gray market network that supplies metaphysical research firms and even military testing programs with human specimens. The trade operated almost entirely unregulated, legally distinct from organ donation and often invisible to consumers. Sunset Mesa was not the only broker. It was simply the one that got caught. The collapse forced regulators to admit that in death, at the final, good faith was never enough. For the people of Montrose, the fallout lingered. Some families held second memorials. Others refused to. The building itself sat empty for years, a white shell with boarded windows. Locals call it the cold house. When the Return to Nature case broke 5 years later, just 150 miles away, the parallels were unbearable. 2 funeral homes, 2 mass discoveries, 1 state, 1 cause. No system, no oversight, no accountability. What began as a crime scene became a mirror. Sunset Mesa showed how well reverence can coexist with rot when the system depends on belief instead of good. The people who trusted the Hess family weren't naive. They were ordinary citizens in a country whose assumed dignity is protected by law. The truth was simpler and crueler. There was no law. There was only faith and the paperwork that depended to honor it. You've been listening to When Cerberus Fell Asleep, hosted by Karen Pinter.